Welcome to the Hawkeye Sidekick podcast. And you're very welcome back to the Hawkeye Sidekick Rugby podcast with your host Mark Kennedy, joined this week, bumper episode, with Liam O'Brien, regular pundit on the podcast, and Joe McCarthy from Irish_abroad Twitter handle. Obviously, this week we're reviewing the Six Nations, the final round of fixtures, seeing France secure, I think, a well-deserved Grand Slam championship, Ireland securing the Triple Crown, and probably the good news story for the Six Nations, Italy winning at the death against Wales. Hope all things are good, guys.
Yeah, brilliant, Mark. Such drama in the Six Nations for a final weekend, wasn't it?
Absolutely, God, yeah, it was good. I was down in lovely sunny Dingle for a stag party weekend, so apologies if I'm sounding a bit nasally during the podcast episode, but let's get on to the Guinness Six Nations, guys. What were your kind of stand-up moments from the last weekend? Maybe, Joe, we could start with yourself.
Well, good to talk to you again, Mark. And how you doing, Liam? I think each game across the weekend had something in it. We had the opening game between Wales and Italy. On face value, a bit of a dead rubber. I know Wales had an outside chance of finishing a bit higher up the table, but their performances across the tournament haven't really inspired, but no one really gave Italy much of a chance. But suddenly, live sport does what only live sport can do, and a last minute try and conversion for a first win in Cardiff. And suddenly, Italy are the big story. Then coming to the Ireland game, knowing that we needed a win to have any chance of lifting the title, and also to bring home the Triple Crown. I felt that Ireland were they were functional, workmanlike, but also organised and got the job done. It's the kind of performance that you wanted to see. I think we kind of felt like we wanted to see from this Ireland team. We wanted to see them go out and not grind out a win, but just be professional and get the win that they deserved. And then in the final game between France and England, France knowing that a win would bring not just the title but the Grand Slam, and England looking to save some face after a fairly bland tournament, you'd have to say. I mean, between outside of France, they probably got the biggest or the largest playing squad available to them, but they lost the opening game against Scotland back at the beginning of February, and I think they struggled to recover, not just from the result, from the performance. So now they finished with 3 losses. And looking down the barrel of a World Cup only 18 months away, you'd have to ask, will they even have how much of the current squad will be in place in France in 18 months' time? But will they have the same coach leading them there?
Good points there, Joe. Liam, what were your standout moments from the weekend?
Yeah, Capuzzo and the Italian commentary I heard afterwards. Was pretty spectacular end to the game there. And although I was still quite nervous with Garbisi trying to take the conversion, typical Italian, they probably booted left of centre, But I think to me that puts to bed, along with the Italy under-20s, they're 3 from 5 as well, this thing of Italy being kicked out of the Six Nations, because it's probably only going to get better for Italy from now on. We have your man Capuzzo now signing for Toulouse, and they don't want to sign duds. They're not going to sign it just for pad work, Yep. In terms of Ireland, I thought we clearly built on last year's Six Nations, and you could even say that France Ireland game was an absolute belter of a match. And in the second half, we still could have had a chance to even win that as well, So we weren't that far away from winning the Grand Slam ourselves. France, I suppose, finally delivered. I suppose last year they kind of choked a bit in games as well. They had that edgy moments in Wales, the second half in Wales, but won it in style in the end, I think, against England, it has to be said. They had way more in the tank than you felt against England as well. England, 2 wins from 5 again. And I mean, I'm surprised that there's absolutely no talk of Eddie Jones being in trouble whatsoever. And Wales really haven't done anything in this tournament whatsoever. I suppose a lot of guys won't be playing for Wales again after that Italian loss the weekend as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think I concur with all your points, guys. I think that France did really pick their moments against England, didn't they? It was very much, I think they got the fright of their lives in the Principality Stadium in round 4, and thought this was much more a composed performance. Helped most ball measured by Fiku's try after 15 minutes. They really did soak up an awful lot of defensive pressure off England. I mean, the stats there, like England ran for 588 metres, guys. You wouldn't have thought it in terms of the scoreboard, but I mean, it just showed Deshaun Edwards' defensive system in complete and utter control. And France really picking their moments. I think well deserving. Again, Ntamack and Dupont, who were a little bit indifferent against Wales, pick up their game immensely. I thought the half-back partnership there completely dominated England, to be fair. I think Ireland just did what they had to do against Scotland, but I think it raised an awful lot of serious questions about Scotland, particularly with the stories that have come immediately out of it after the off-pitch discipline in terms of Hogg and 5 others of the Scottish squad going out for drinks, breaking curfew, and he's still being retained as captain. I think there's an awful lot of discussion going on in Scotland circles regarding Stuart Hogg here in terms of long-term captaincy, when they have the likes of Richie, Skinner, Hamish Watson there. So I think out of all the head coaches, I think Gregor Thompson is probably the most vulnerable, really. I mean, they have absolutely zero excuses given the start that they made, but I think it has been an utter shambles for Scotland. I know they've had injury depth issues in the pack, but again, it's the old failings again. And I think as regards the Italy game, I think Capuzzo, he's just such a talent, isn't he, guys? That last minute line break, I mean, had no right to go through the tackles he did, but then the composure to get Padovano in, I thought was just exceptional. He looks like an absolute star in the making, and the fact that Toulouse have him is just does not show the hallmark of the player. So I think it's been quite an exciting tournament, to be perfectly fair. I don't know if we want to go to the Ireland-Scotland game, guys, just in terms of overall thoughts here. I mean, it looked fairly routine. Scotland did have a few line breaks. Keenan, I thought, outstanding again at full-back, but you never really felt at any juncture of the game that Ireland were in any way in danger here.
I think Scotland would probably... I think any Scotland fan would probably agree with you in that. We kept them scoreless in the second half. We kept them scoreless even from the 34th minute. And the only score they got in the whole game was a single try. Whereas, we were constantly keeping the scoreboard ticking over. Making replacements for players who needed a rest, and even finishing with Joey Carberry at fullback, which I didn't think was an option available to us. I'm not saying he should be our starting 15 going forward, but it's good to see that he was given an opportunity to play in a different position. Look, I think the celebrations were probably a bit muted. Look, we've won the Triple Crown before, we've won the Six Nations before, and we've won the Grand Slam before. But we all knew going into this game that the real main event was happening in Paris. I'm not sure if anyone thought England were going to spoil the party. I know I certainly didn't. And we finished second, and we got a trophy for finishing second at the moment. It's an improvement on last year's Six Nations in that we were, if we were third, won 3 and lost 2, and we've improved this season. We won 4 and lost 1, and the one we lost was to the Grand Slam champions, now the de facto best team in the Northern Hemisphere and arguably the best team in the world at the moment. That's a discussion we're probably going to come back to after the summer tours and the championship is completed in the Southern Hemisphere. But I know the last time I was on the podcast, I said it off air that France are building a team for the World Cup, and I think this season is when that team came of age. I don't know if they prioritised the Grand Slam, but I think they definitely prioritised winning the championship. And if you look down at the age profile of the squads, they only have 3 players over the age of 30, whereas to compare with that, Ireland have 11. So in as I say, 18 months time, that squad, that French squad are going to have they'll be hitting their peak, whereas realistically we're looking at replacing of those 11 probably 5 or 6. I don't know if and on top of that there's 5 players age 29 who will be north of 30 when the World Cup rolls around. So yeah, I don't want to put a downer on things. I don't want to sound down after winning a trophy, after winning the Triple Crown. But I think one of the problems that's been around Irish rugby for certainly at senior international level is that we're too busy trying to win what's in front of us and not trying to win what's a little bit further down the line. And I think that's possibly what's happened here. I mean, I would have happily sacrificed the Triple Crown, or if it meant that giving some of the more promising younger players top level game time with a view to having, or just so they have that experience going into the World Cup in France in September next year.
Absolutely, Joe. Liam, might get you back in here just in terms of overall thoughts in terms of Ireland, positives, negatives. Are you seeing any kind of glaring squad depth issues?
Yeah, look, clearly there's been improvement. I mean, Sheehan, to me, I suppose, with the injury to Kelleher, we were kind of saying who's going to really step up here, and he has been absolute explosive power. He's kind of like one of these like Southern Hemisphere guys who's like, he's the power for carrying. He's good on the ground. He has the overall game. He can throw in as well. We also have gotten Doris has just kicked on big time as well. Lowe fully deserves his spot. Jameson Gibson Park is clearly number 9 now, and he plays at the right tempo for me. I would kind of concur with Joe that we're kind of always missing the bigger picture here. South Africa, before the last World Cup, they were playing rugby championship, and they actually selected 2 different squads for 2 different games, and they were willing to mix and match. And France clearly here again are building a very powerful young squad. So it's something that we have to think about ourselves. At a certain point, I'm not saying you have to totally sacrifice, a Six Nations, but you certainly have to see still question marks about the obvious number 10, question marks about Loosehead and Tighthead Prop as well. So those have to be addressed.
I suppose this is where it comes into a summer tour to New Zealand, guys. Did I see Jamie Heaslip on the press literally going on about the summer tour to New Zealand to maybe leave a certain number 10 at home? What would you think about that, leaving Sexton in Ireland for that New Zealand summer series, Joe?
It's an interesting question, and you'd have to say that bringing Sexton with us will always guarantee you, will give you a much better chance of winning. He's, even though he's 36, will be 37 in the summer, he was still named as the start, or as number 10 in many people's team of the tournament, and I'd have to go along with that. The argument was, even though we lost in France, If we had Sexton in the team, would we have, not saying we would have won, but I think, the margin of victory would certainly been a lot less. I think it probably is the best to leave him. Look, Sexton is, he's always been targeted by opposition players, and as I mentioned in the last podcast, he is getting to that age now where he's not recovering from injuries as quickly as he used to. I think we're all kind of I think we're all getting to that age, and I know I'm certainly past it. And look, we've beaten New Zealand. We've done it a couple of times. We've done it at home. We've done it away. I don't get me wrong, beating New Zealand will always be a huge achievement in rugby just because of their status in the international game. But if leaving Sexton at home means giving up the tour and possibly giving up 3 losses, in exchange for giving our options at 10 experience at probably the highest level outside of actual Six Nations Championship rugby, I think it might be the right idea. We don't want to get caught again if any starting player, but especially if Sexton gets injured or gets suspended and is suddenly unavailable, and we have to parachute in, say Carberry, who's excuse me, who's I think he got his first start in the current Six Nations, which to me is an absolutely mind-boggling start. For a player with his profile, who's been earmarked as a potential successor to Sexton for so long, to only make his first start in a game at the age of 26, it's like that just doesn't add up in my head at all, and it kind of speaks to maybe the short-termism. That's probably be too harsh, but like I said, that the fixation with the national side is just to win what's in front of you and not what's a little bit a year, 18 months, 2 years down the line. I know I keep going back to France, but after the last World Cup, and possibly even before the World Cup, when they were awarded the World Cup in 2023, they made a very conscious decision that anyone who would be maybe over the age of 30 by the time this World Cup rolls around was dropped from the squad in favor of giving their outstanding young talent game time, experience. And now what we've seen in this Six Nations is the end. Well, it's not the end result. The end result is going to be in the World Cup, but the first kind of major result of that choice. And maybe it's time the IRFU made some decisions like that.
Yeah, Liam, bring you in there. Just on Sexton, New Zealand tour. Would you bring in yes or no?
Yeah. What a nightmare scenario, honestly. 3 test tour to New Zealand, and you're going to throw Sexton in there like your MVP. I think myself I'd also kind of leave Sexton at home and bring the next 3 out halves, basically. I mean, we went to South Africa a few years back, and granted we had Paddy Jackson, who was and clearly is the second choice out half for Ireland. But we did okay. We also selected we also went down to Australia, if I remember, and we selected Carberry for a test as well, and he did well there. So yeah, I'd be quite confident that we have to trust in the other number 10s. It's only by playing them that you can see what they can actually deliver.
Yeah, I think this is make or break for this Ireland tour, particularly in New Zealand. I think there's vast depth in various units, but I think definitely the 10, maybe your loose head and tight head, is definitely areas of probably concern after the Six Nations, but definitely on the 10 front. Like, I don't know what Joy Carberry must be feeling right now after that Scottish cameo where he was literally substituted in for Keenan. I thought he'd get at least 20 minutes at least against Scotland at 10. to show his worth. But then he's just literally in the backfield, and to be honest with you, the amount of ball he got was negligible. So I probably would concur with you guys. I think Sexton, we have to game manage him now to World Cup 2023. And we have to build up the depth chart. We have to see who's the man. Who's the man to succeed Sexton after the World Cup? And again, as you've seen, Joe, when you were in Japan, key players going down with injury, we just had no backup. I mean, I think we need to make that hard call now. I mean, Sexton will want to travel to New Zealand and play New Zealand in New Zealand to maybe secure a very rare Ireland win in New Zealand. But I think the bigger picture has to be, can we get a competitive squad from, 1 to 35, essentially? So I definitely would go with that. I suppose, guys, kind of moving on from Ireland, the other team probably that is probably looking at a few questions is probably England after this. You had another, as I think, Joe, you mentioned bland tournament. And I suppose, apart from Marcus Smith, there wasn't really much attacking creativity, but I've seen social media again swirling around about Eddie Jones. I mean, for someone to get the sack now 18 months from a World Cup would be sheer lunacy, particularly with Eddie Jones. He will try to get it right with the pack, but I don't know, guys. Can you see any positives for England going into next season and into the 2023 World Cup? Joe, maybe start off with there.
From this tournament, not really, no. I mean, if you look back even to the very start of it, the very first game, they lost to Scotland in Edinburgh, and was it a shock? I mean, the result itself was probably a shock, but go back and watch the game, and England never really threatened in that game against Scotland, and Scotland were good value for the win. The following week, the following round, then they went out and trounced Italy 33-0. Again, we had thought that Italy would suffer the backlash, and they did. That was probably, that was their, and that was it. Then they lost to, then beat Italy and then beat Wales, and then the sending off against Ireland probably decided that game. I actually did think that they played better than the scoreline would suggest. But when you're a player down after only 2 minutes, the result is probably academic at that stage. I mean, how long is Jones in charge now? And can you say that he was brought in to win the World Cup? Is he going to do that with this England team? I don't think so. They paid out massive amount of money to get him out of his contract, and it hasn't really paid off for them. That's successive finishes of third or fourth in the table. France are the clear power in the Northern Hemisphere. Ireland are improving. Even Italy, sorry, I say even Italy, that's disrespectful to the Italians. Italy produced some great moments across the tournament, and I don't think you can say that about this England team. The outstanding, the only good thing maybe, or the high point of their tournament is that Marcus Smith was the top point scorer, with 71. But I mean, does that mean that they're going to be relying on him to drag them to the title in next year's Six Nations or in the World Cup? I don't know. I mean, he's not Johnny Wilkinson, but there's only ever been one Johnny Wilkinson, and I don't think we might never see another player like on his level again, lining out for England. So there's a lot of questions for the RFU to answer over the next 12 months.
Absolutely. Liam, any positives there for England that you can see?
It's a struggle, really, But yeah, you'd have to say Marcus Smith. Even in that France game in the second half, he's showing goals and he's high steps. He was trying to kick things off. Of course, there was no other guys at that wavelength. So he was almost like a one-man attack. Ellis Genge had a massive tournament, very, very, very
Massive,
strong. Yeah. A massive. He's a serious player, Itoje as well was very prominent in the tournament. What stands out for me is that Eddie Jones got rid of an awful lot of guys whose faces didn't fit, and I think we probably just inferred were just too old. Mako and Billy Vonipola and Alex Lazowski, Danny Kerr, Cipriani. And it's fine. That's fine to say that they're too old and we're building for the World Cup. But the guys who came in weren't at their level. So I think the young talent isn't quite the level, say, as France. France has the luxury of a few under-21 World Cup wins and bringing in these guys. England don't have that luxury, and England don't really seem to have the talent. Even compared to what's coming through for Ireland, England don't seem to have anything like that level.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the only person we can Gardner is probably Marcus Smith, and I think it'll be a fascinating battle between himself and Owen Farrell when Farrell gets back fully fit next season. He'll be all guns blazing. I think in fairness to Smith, as you said, the wavelength wasn't really there, and I'm surprised given the likes of Henry Slade at 12. I mean, it's Manu Tuangi or bust for Eddie Jones right now. I think that's proven quite categorically after the Six Nations tournament. He is the be-all and end-all for Eddie. When it comes to 2023, this is a guy that's going to be equivalent to Johnny Sexton to get him one piece in 2023 and deliver. And I think the fact of the matter is he just doesn't trust anyone at 13 right now. He used Elliot Daly, Joe Marchant, who I have an awful lot of time for, really didn't get a time of day with Eddie Jones. A few cameos, didn't get much quality ball, go forward ball. And as you say yourself, that back three as well has been very, very mixed. I mean, Stewart's fullback, then he's put on the wing, then the Furman in there for the inaugural debut in Paris. And we know as Irish rugby fans, we've seen that before, where a debutant goes to Paris and doesn't feature again for their international side. So I think for England, probably quite a few questions, but I think if one man that could literally rouse a nation to get it back on its feet, I think Eddie is probably it. But there's going to have to be significant improvements made, particularly in the attacking side of the ball, because pack platform is certainly there. I mean, Sinclair I thought was very solid along with Jamie George. Colin Dickey did have his kind of brain fart moment against Scotland, but these are all quality players. Tom Curry comes back in, wasn't as prominent, but that is a potent pack. Again, they do have question marks over 9. Ben Youngs versus Randall. I would be going for Randall right now, but Eddie Jones, Paris, no-brainer. Ben Youngs is the guy. Again, at 2023 coming along. There are issues. It's that integration of youth and experience here, and I think Liam, you probably hit the nail on the head. I think they maybe have culled a few the guys too quickly, without kind of bedding in one or two of them in November, one or two of them in the Six Nations, and then kind of phasing the guys out. So I think from that perspective, I think England have an awful lot, and Martin Gleeson as well in the coaching setup, I think is probably under massive pressure right now to get things right, particularly in the summer tour. And then probably Wales as well, guys. I mean, this time last week, Liam, we were exuding about Wales, about the squad depth, that this was a team due to injuries, things that have been going on, that they looked quite rosy for 2023. Now, it's a great story with Italy, but I think from a Welsh perspective, at least they've run the rule on an awful lot of depth charts, and they know where they are, I think, going into next season and run up to 2023, Liam.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue of all the teams in the tournament, that Wales have, because of the horrific injury they've actually completely experimented with their team in all positions, and they know exactly what's coming through, and that isn't much, has to be said. And I think that Wales, it's coming back to bite them, this whole regional rugby, not investing in the regions themselves, and underage not coming through either. And they usually produce one or two good players in a tournament that really come from nowhere. It hasn't really happened in this tournament either. And when you saw Alan Wynne Jones come on, you kind of said to yourself, that guy, he won't be around for the World Cup. So at a certain point you have to cull players too, and that will have to happen for Wales as well.
Absolutely. Joe, get you in there regarding Wales. I think it's been a mixed bag, really. I think the Italian results probably been an absolute downer for them if you can see the social media Twitter posts. But any positives there for Welsh fans listening to this podcast?
Probably not. I mean, if you look where they were last year, they were, the winners of the Six Nations, and now they're the fifth best team in the Northern Hemisphere, and you could even they finished fifth in the table, but Italy are below them, and the counter argument is that Italy beat them, so Italy must be better. So are Wales the sixth best team in the Six Nations? There's some serious questions needed to be asked about Welsh rugby, and we knew that before the tournament kicked off. I was at that game against Wales, the opening game for Ireland in Aviva Stadium, and they didn't offer anything until the last 5 minutes with Basham went over for a try. And honestly, that was the biggest disappointment on the day, was that Ireland weren't able to keep them to nil. That a late lapse in concentration cost them that cost the Irish team that clean sheet. You kind of want, if you look at the club situation and taking that into account, they're not impressing in either in the rugby championship or in any European competition this season. Their only win came against, it was probably a bit of a surprise given that it was against Scotland, who had beaten England, coming off the back of that England win. They didn't, they struggled to score in every game. It's 76 points across the tournament. I mean, 20, only slightly more than 20 than what's that? That's barely 15 points a game. It's not looking good for Welsh rugby, and that's a shame because I've gone to games against Wales before, and the fans, when they come here to Dublin, they're extremely passionate about the game. They love what rugby in Wales. It's a massive part of their identity, and to see that the state that it's in now, you'd wonder how they're going to recover from this.
Certainly, I think it's been a tough end to pretty tough championship, and as you said, the 15-point average, it's very unusual for a Wayne Pivak man outside, particularly Scarlets. You'd think of free-flowing rugby, creating width at will. I suppose the only positives I can probably take from it is at least they know what the squad depth is now. Where you'd had people probably talking about such and such a guy from the Ospreys or Scarlets or whatever. At least they kind of know front five particularly where they're at, because I thought Italy really took them to school over the weekend, to be perfectly honest. The back row depth, I think, had definitely got enhanced with Tane Basham. I know he was injured towards the latter end, but at least he made a nice impact. Same with Morgan as well from Ospreys, are real promising. But again, Wales always turn out those back rowers, and scrum half options as well. You've Hardy Williams. I still think there's life still in Rhys Webb there to emerge in 2023. I suppose life after Allen Jones, lads. To be fair to this front five, one result shouldn't really affect things. There's a summer tour coming on here as well. What are the options like? I suppose I thought Wales steadily improved before, the England Twickenham performance, particularly the second half, was very good. They've had flashes. Scotland in Principality Stadium took Scotland to school as well. Again, there's been some good points, but again, I think squad depth wise, they know where they're at. To be perfectly fair, I suppose then we can get to Scotland here, guys. For me personally, I think Scotland have been the letdown in championship. Pure and simple. I think they have been, because they've been talking great game for the last few years about how they were going to make the breakthrough, and this year being really a prime example of that. Calcutta Cup win against England at Murrayfield. How much of a platform do you need? And then, Joe, you say Principality Stadium against Wales, have a vulnerable team, a Welsh team on the back foot, and to be perfectly fair, lads, never performed, and the campaign spiraled out of control thereafter. Guys, I'm very negative about Scotland. Do you have any positives about Scotland in this championship, or even the head coach Gregor Thompson for that matter? Joe.
Well, I think, Mark, as you mentioned earlier, the end of the tournament and perhaps everything that went on off the field has maybe put a dampener on the tournament than the results for Scotland. Sorry, just went, for some reason I hit my mute button there and I didn't mean to. Look, after that opening round, a win against England at Twickenham, the first one since 2019, retaining the Calcutta Cup, you kind of thought that this might be the season for Scotland to, as you say, push on into that next level, and then it's immediately followed up by a loss in Wales, and then a loss to France, and then finally getting their second win against Italy, and then showing up against Ireland, but just kind of being there. Like I said, they were completely, we kept them scoreless in the second half, and it was only that single try, they registered that 5 points. I don't know, Scotland just seem to be in the eternal doldrums when it comes to international rugby. They're never quite bad enough that it's that people start panicking, but they're never quite good enough that people start celebrating either. I in terms of positives from the tournament, probably just that England win. But when you think about it, that was the first win. That was the first round, and then everything that happened after that just happened.
Absolutely, Liam, get you in there. Maybe a tad too harsh on the Scottish here.
No. Of all teams, I mean, they've totally blown it from the opening day win against England. That Wales was a really shocking performance, to see. And then we had the France game where Finn Russell pretty much walking around for parts of that game, getting the win against Italy and offering absolutely nothing against ourselves the last day. Now, look, in terms of positives, I think Hamish Watson, I think he hasn't missed a tackle in the Six Nations in 4 seasons. He is some player, but it's some of their backline. Stuart Hogg still gets these brain fart moments as well, or moments when he should be scoring tries. And in terms of, then you wonder about the coach, Townsend. Is he too strict on the squad, or are they just not respecting him whatsoever? He also has, of course, the thing of, it's easy to say that those players should have been dropped after last weekend going out drinking, but they have a real small panel of elite players to choose from, and he doesn't have that luxury ultimately long term to do that, and that's why he's kind of in a bit of a fix that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think for Gregor Thompson, you have to remember, this is a guy that was in the British Irish Lions that had basically vouched for Finn Russell in a third test match against South Africa. And for him to then go around and then basically drop Finn Russell for Blair Kinghorn, who, to be honest, is a good footballer. He has shown it in flashes in the URC. But then to basically have him in Dublin, I thought the 10 performance was well short of test match standard, to be fair. And I think that leans an awful lot to head coach here. I think head coach is under a massive pressure. I think head coach is maybe hearing an awful lot of rumours from Scottish rugby fans to basically putting Kinghorn over Russell. We can say what we say about Finn Russell. Russell is a game winner, to be fair. But I think the Hogg situation particularly is one that has really got the ire of an awful lot of Scottish rugby fans that I've been talking to, particularly not even stripping the captaincy from Hogg after a curfew. That wasn't off the realms of possibility here. They had outstanding candidates in Hamish Watson. I mean, Watson is a complete leader in that back row. And the positive I can probably think of from Scotland is Darge, who's come in and under an awful lot of, extreme circumstances here with the pack being decimated by injury. Let's acknowledge that. But for a young lad to come in and impress as he's done, I think that's a good future. I think there's a nice little back row combination going to hit there for Scotland. But I think for Townsend, it's going to be an awkward review with the Scottish Rugby Union in the next week or two to run the rule over this, because the discipline has reared its head more than once here, particularly with Scotland under Townsend's watch. And I don't know, I think the captaincy is probably a live debate. They do have the summer tour. It'll be very interesting to see what it goes down, because this is perceived as a golden generation of Scottish rugby. And to be fair, we're getting into 2023. I'd even question the fact that, looks at Magnus Bradbury, guys like that have been dispensed with a season or two too early in my eyes. Still quality performers. So I think there's an awful lot of soul searching to have to go on here within Scottish Rugby, Scottish Rugby Union, the URC, Edinburgh and Glasgow. We see week in, week out are very competitive. So there's obviously a disconnect here between the URC and the international team here. So, I mean, Townsend will retain his job, but I think long-term strategy-wise, I think there is massive questions here, particularly in Scotland, and how they move on from here. Yeah, guys, I think we can conclude there, Six Nations. I mean, I think we talked about Italy as well, being great and all that sort of stuff, but maybe we can get your thoughts in terms of maybe team of the tournament, in terms of maybe a few positions here. I see various journalists have literally provided their opinions, and let's kind of add ours to the mix, really. Full-back wise, guys, who did you feel was the standout performer? Maybe we'll start with you, Joe.
Can you just give me a minute, Mark? I put my trying to dig out my tournament deck or my team here.
Yeah, no worries at all, Joe. Yeah, grand. Liam, yourself? Maybe we can get your kind of team first 15 here.
Oh yeah, but in terms of full back, I mean, it's clearly between Jaminet and Keenan. I was really tempted to go with Capuzzo as well, you know, for his brief appearances. But I would plump with Hugo Keenan. I thought he was absolutely faultless, and he came stronger into each game actually, and he displayed a lot more attacking play and defensively absolutely outstanding. So I plump for him for 15.
Who would be your back three here?
Back three on the left. I would be between probably Lowe and Villiers. Lowe made absolutely massive yardage, always look for the ball, scored a bucket load of tries, huge boot to him, so I'll go for Lowe. So the Irish patriotism is really coming in, isn't it? Like, you know, 2 and 3 so far Irish. Other wing would have to be Damien Penno. Absolutely. You know, probably obviously the back three player of the tournament by far and away. Yeah, I have to say that. In terms of the centre combination, go all French with Dante and Fiku. I think what the most interesting thing maybe of this tournament as well has been how those two defensively so solid and the French backline are so strong defensively now, with the whole hallmark of Sean Edwards. That's been actually fascinating to watch. Then in terms of Nyan, like, you don't even have to say, it has to be the little General Dupont. And for 10, I would go with Intimac over Sexton, just on the basis that Sexton played, I think for me, 2.125 games, 2 and 8 games, because Sexton was outstanding in the games that he did actually play in. Front row, I would go with Cyril Bailly, 1, just ahead of Ellis Genge. Number 2, Marchand. And 3, I'd probably go with Furlong. Then the line out, I'd go with Itoje and Cameron Walkie. 6, I will go with the Italian captain, Lamaro, who I thought was actually immense in every game he played in terms of his tackle count and his leadership. 7, that was a tough one, like, you know, because Van der Fleer was outstanding in all his games, but I'll go with Gelange. And number 8 is probably the player of the tournament for me, Gregory Aldrich.
Absolutely. Joe, we have you back. Any thoughts there on that?
Yeah, so I was able to dig out my notes. So at fullback, it was tough. I think it came down to the same decision. Do we go with Hugo Keenan or Chaminade? And I went with Chaminade, but honestly, if you ask me the same question tomorrow, I could probably go with Keenan. It's honestly it's impossible to split the two of them, and I think probably head ruling heart and maybe logic coming out, that's what France achieved, what Chaminade achieved in that French team is probably what's pushing me towards giving him the 15 jersey. At 14, I had to go with James Lowe. I think to come in he's really shown what he can do. Sorry, did I say 14? Yeah, James Lowe, right wing. Left wing. Sorry, I'm all over the place tonight. I think he's a real bright spark for Ireland. He's the kind of player that you can almost build a team around, and he's definitely going to be one that we're going to be watching. Not just in the summer or next season, but for a long time to come. 14. I've gone for Penaud, and my apologies for my pronunciation. It's terrible. My French is pretty bad, but again, kind of similar to Chaminade. He's across the tournament, he's just been unbelievable, really. And like I've said, they've built something at France in the French Union, and he's a massive part of that. 13, and again, sorry, at 12 and 13, you can't look beyond Dante and Fiku either. They're they build everything through at the French team comes through them. They seem to have an almost telepathic relationship with each other. You think of O'Driscoll and Darcy, and that's probably as high a compliment as you can pay anyone as an Irish rugby fan. Just the relationship that they have. Each of them seem to know exactly what the other is thinking. Sorry, that's 12 and 13. At 10, I agonized over this one. I mean, Sexton, I don't know if he played enough across the tournament to be, he was to be in the team of the tournament, if you know what I mean. I think he was a massive loss for Ireland when he was missing, especially in Paris in their only loss in the tournament. But I've actually gone for Marcus Smith. I think he's he's a top point scorer. So I mean it's more than just that. He was England's best player. In the last game against France when I felt like he was the one that was still trying to drive England forward. He was still trying to get a result, and I think if the England team had if the rest of them had that mentality, it wouldn't have been a problem. So at 9, again, it kind of came down to an Irish player and a French player. Is Gibson Park or Dupont? And I've actually gone for Gibson Park, but again, if you ask me tomorrow, or if you even ask me in 10 minutes, I could probably say Dupont. I think what I've seen for Gibson Park in this Six Nations, and it's something I haven't seen or maybe I haven't noticed before, is that the style of play that he has, he fits in to the style of rugby that the coach wants us to play. And I think that in terms of pure talent, I think Conor Murray is probably a better player, but in this Ireland team, Gibson Park is a better scrum half. If you know what I mean, just in terms of a fit. 8. Yeah, look, it's Aldrich. I mean, I don't think there's anyone else that could be wearing that jersey. He's just a magnificent player, and again, just in this French team, I don't know if they have any. It sounds disrespectful to say they don't have any outstanding players, but they're all so good that to be outstanding in it, you have to be even in another class. I think, but yeah, I've gone with Aldrich. At 7, Van der Fleer. Again, I think he's been in great form for Leinster. He's brought that to the Six Nations. I think there's very little more I can say about him. We've seen what he can do, as he's developed over in the Ireland team over the last few years. And yeah, look, he's probably one of the best. I think he's the best in the Northern Hemisphere anyway. Which again is an amazing compliment to pay him. At 6, it was tough. But ultimately, I was probably making it more difficult than it was when I went back and looked down through it. Like sometimes the obvious choice is, I was thinking, is it too easy? But look, sometimes the obvious choice is the obvious choice for a reason, and it's Tyburn. It's just in that Ireland pack. He's a leader. He's going to, when we see him on the summer tour in New Zealand, he's one of the players you can point to and say, he could easily be wearing an All Blacks jersey because he's that good. Second row, number 4, I've gone for, and again, my apologies for my pronunciation, Willems from France, and beside him, and possibly a little bit of a surprise, I've gone for Rowlands from Wales. I think, look, replacing Alwyn Jones is not going to be easy for anyone. He's a legend, not just in Wales, but in international rugby. But I felt that Rowlands was one of the bright spots for Wales in what will ultimately, what ultimately finished as a very disappointing tournament for the side. And beside him then, Williams, look, 41 tackles across the tournament, one of the highest in the Six Nations. Scored a try against Scotland. I think it was fairly easy to pick in the end. And then finally, up front, as hooker, I've gone for, maybe a little bit out of order, but I've Dan Sheehan. Again, came down to between him and an Irish player and a French player, Marchand. It was maybe this is one of the few occasions across the team where I've gone with heart over head, but I think that Sheehan's play across the tournament, lineouts, scored tries. He's what we kind of expect from a modern front row player. He's only 23. He's still to break into double figures in terms of Ireland caps, and to play like that, it's probably, I think the potential for him is possibly is, sky's the limit for him really. I'm going to finish number 3. Gone for Ellis. Excuse me. Ellis. I'm sorry. Is it Genji or Gengi?
Oh, Genji.
Yeah, Genji. Yeah, sorry. I don't remember how to pronounce his name. Look. Again, maybe similar to Roland's at Wales. I know it's a bright spark in a disappointing tournament, or a team that had a disappointing tournament. But just he had 40 tackles across the 5 games. 8 a game. That's it's impressive in anyone's book. And he's a threat with ball in hand. And I just think that England, again, like in 12 months' time, when England are picking their squad for the 23 Six Nations, he's going to be one of the first names on the team sheet. And then finally, number 1, it's Cyril Bay from France. It's only his second Six Nations, but 35 tackles across it. Carried the ball for 25 meters on average per game. Again, if you want an example of what France have done and what France are building, what France have been building for the last 3 years, you can point right at the man wearing the number 1 jersey for the French team. So, I think probably a lot of players similar there to Liam. 1 or 2 maybe controversial picks, and I don't know. Still undecided about Marcus Smith at 10, but I think I'm happy with it. But if you ask me again in 24 hours, I'd probably wonder what I was thinking.
Your number crunching data analytics skills holds no bounds there, Joe. But I think I concur with most of you guys there, to be perfectly fair. I mean, I'll quickly go down through them. I had Jamine or Keenan. I just went for Keenan, just part overhead, really, to be honest. Consistency, I thought his attacking play from fullback really evolved this year. So it gets a nod, but I think Jamine is a true leader in this French side right now. After round 4 in Wales, Principality Stadium, and other French lads were not doing it, Jamine stood up. So I think that's a marginal call. Penn all 3 tries, I think, is a lock at 14. Viku and Dante, defensive stalwarts of that back line, I thought picked themselves, really, to be fair. Low at 11, I think, obviously, had an awful lot of good cameos there. 10, I went for Antimac purely because France won the Grand Slam, but I would give Garbesi from Italy a bit of a nod here, because I thought in various periods there, I thought Garbesi was absolutely class. And if he could get a few of the under-20s, get a bit of a packed platform around him, and hopefully this win in the Principality Stadium will do that, we'll see the best of this guy come 2023 in the World Cup. Dupont, for me, Little General, was he was class in the key moments, particularly against England. Really was class. Aldrich, I think, was my player of the tournament anyway. Van der Fleer, I thought I went for. Lamaro from Italy, 6. Now, I would recognise a guy from the French front row or pack row that doesn't get really much recognition. Cruz, for me, was absolutely immense. From first whistle to last whistle, he's one of these guys that'll make the 14, 15, 16 tackles. He'll do all the hard work. He is an absolute talisman for this French side. So I think an honourable mention there. I think Cameron Wokey, what an athlete. And Mario Otaji, 4 or 5. I think give an honourable mention to Ty Byrne as well from Ireland. I thought he had a superb tournament. He's Mr. Versatile, really. Byrne, where do you put him? Do you put him second row, back row? I mean, he's predominantly playing back row or second row. So, but I think Wokey and Otaji for me. I thought Otaji, particularly at the end of the tournament, particularly when Ewell's going off, I thought was a key kind of moment for him. He really stepped up leadership-wise. And then front row, I think Furlong, even though he had a tough outing against England, I think is being predominantly our best front rower for many years, still class. Marchand, for me, absolutely outstanding. But I mean, Dan Sheehan has basically is owning that jersey from Ireland right now. And I think when Ronan Kelleher comes back and Rob Herring, it'll be a fascinating duel. And then number 1, I'm going for Ellis Genge. The guy, I'd love to play with this guy. I think he's an absolute legend, to be perfectly fair. And I think 78 metres against France last Saturday really did capture the hearts and minds of England for a little bit of the match. So that's my 15 there anyway, guys. I know we're running a bit late, guys, but do we want a few brief comments about Munster v Lions in Johannesburg? A hot day in the Ellis Park, 1700 metre altitude. Great start for Munster, Liam, but unfortunately got a harsh lesson in how to close a contest from the hosts. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it was a great start to the 21-10 half time, and then to not do anything in the second half completely. Now, there was a key moment there on the 49th or 50th minute where Alice Kendall's try was disallowed, and it was, I don't know, it was controversial because you're only supposed to go back two phases, maybe three phases. This was definitely about 5 or 6 phases back, and after that, then, almost a minute or two later, the Lions bring in their entire new front row. And from that point on, they demolished us in every aspect. They had 2 brothers, Vincent and Emmanuel, 2 huge back rowers as well, like running at us. And guys wilted as well, it has to be said, A lot of guys were noticeable wilted. But like, desperate to lose the 2 games so tightly, and it puts us in a position where I would say we're looking for Ulster and Leinster now in South Africa to win their 2 games, to pretty much that would ensure that we'd be in the top 4. That's the way it's looking. But there was positives, I guess, from the sense of Josh Wycherley actually stood out in that game. Jack O'Donoghue over the 2 games was excellent as well. The out half position still hasn't been nailed down, and Patterson, when he came on, actually with noticeable impact as well at scrum half.
Yeah, you've been very impressed by Patterson, haven't you, Liam? I mean, last week in the podcast, you really did mention that you did like the way he plays the game. It's very go forward ball of him. I mean, no disrespect to Cronin either. I thought Cronin was absolutely outstanding in his cameo as well. Some lovely kind of passing kind of exchanges there, particularly with Jack O'Donoghue, I think, for was it one of the tries, was it Wycherley's try just on halftime for the 3rd try. But I mean, the results didn't go according to plan for Munster, but I think this has been a great experience and learning curve for an awful lot of the squad, just in terms of how the game is played in the Southern Hemisphere. I mean, if you look at Salami's try, like right now, I mean, God, he absolutely crushes Nash on the wing. Like, it's or Van der Merwe actually, wasn't it?
Van der Merwe, yeah, bounced.
It was just literally a thunderous ball carry. I mean, you don't get that every day of the week in URC, particularly if you're literally in Wales or Scotland, even in a European Cup game. So I think, to be honest, I know results haven't gone against us. We're a little bit backs against the wall. We need a must-win against Bennett and Rugby, and dare we say, a certain Jason Jenkins apparently is available here. Liam O'Brien for that game. So wait with bated breath there. But I mean, that seems like a must-win. The fixture list for Munster doesn't get any easier really there anyway. But I mean, for the Lions, 146 tackles were made throughout, and I mean, they're kind of lauding their defensive performance at the moment. But as you say, Liam, I think the Candellen try, if that goes over, it's a different complexion completely. But I think Munster were given a bit of a lesson really in the last 20 minutes when the altitude kind of kicked in, and that was a bit of a concern of mine last week, just in terms of the altitude after Loftus Versfeld the previous week before, the exertions, the pack, the squad, the game minutes, it did kind of catch up with us. But I think overall, I think it was a great experience down there in South Africa, and I think it bodes well for the Munster. I think the younger players probably have learned heaps, so hopefully they'll continue to improve. Been a lengthy one here, lads, but I think we've got plenty to go through. I'd like to thank Joe McCarthy. You can follow Joe at Irish_abroad. Joe, that's correct. Is it the hash handle there?
Yep, that's perfect.
Yeah, perfect. And Liam Breen, you can follow. I don't think you have a Twitter handle. I think you should. No, at this stage, Liam, give yourself a plug. Again, you can follow me on Hawkeye Sidekick. But again, next week, probably review the Munster Benetton game and any of the URC action leading into the European Cup games, because I know Connacht have a tasty game against Leinster as well. Familiarity breeding content there after that. So, but until next week, guys, thanks very much.
Thank you for listening to this podcast episode. If you liked what you heard in this podcast, why not subscribe to the Hawkeye Sidekick podcast on either Amazon, Spotify, YouTube or Twitter platforms. You can also follow me at Hawkeye Sidekick on Facebook and Twitter for the latest sporting opinions, articles and reports.